in 2004, and unfortunately she was suffering from congenital hydrocephalus. It can be very dangerous, but actually in Kaylea's case, it was rectified. She was also born with spina bifida, and she literally had no use of her legs, and she had very little feeling in them. Despite her disability, the reality is that she pushed herself, and she pushed herself hard. And to describe this, she didn't even allow other people to push her wheelchair. She even competed in national wheelchair sports. Growing up, confined to a wheelchair with all of these mobility issues, and she's competing in national wheelchair sports. So we can see, again, the potential for this young girl is really, really positive. She was described by people who know her and knew her and loved her as a really lovely girl. Now, she started education in the mainstream when she was 4 years old, just like other kids, so she followed that path. And then she progressed to secondary school. That's when she's 11, that's where we go when we are 11 in the UK. She really enjoyed it. The staff said that she was a really chatty person, she was really funny. Kaylea lived with her family. So she lived with her mother and her father, that's Sarah Lloyd Jones and Alan Titford. She actually had 5 siblings in Newtown Powys. As I've said, she's growing up with her mother and father and also with her siblings. Kaylea wanted to live an independent, normal life in the future. That was absolutely the drive that she had, the goal that she had. But it seems like there was an absolute apathy where her parents were concerned. So first off, I understand that none of us parents enjoy lots of different appointments. We don't, I get it. A lot of us have got busy lives, we work. The idea of taking your child to lots of different appointments is an additional pressure. But of course, what do we do as loving parents? We prioritise that. We prioritise their needs over our own. It is the primary goal of being a parent. There were literally a plethora of services that were offered to Kaylea's family. You know, they wanted to help her with various aspects of her life, and they wanted, as services, to actually take some of the responsibility off her parents, because the services understand that there's a great deal of pressure on parents, so they actually wanted to remove some of the responsibility from Kaylea's parents so that they could have some additional support. When you have other children, often if you have a child with a disability, they take more time, understandably, and that means if they have some respite care and some kind of additional provision, you can concentrate your focus on the other children. However, despite these services being on offer, her mum and dad just failed to cooperate with the professionals, failed to take advantage of any of the services, and because of that, some of these services that Kaylea had been offered and benefited from previously even, they got cancelled. I genuinely believe that the idea of taking her places, allowing people potentially into the home, just creating opportunities that were focused on her, it really didn't concern them. What concerned them was the easiest road possible, and that was to just fail to engage because she wasn't the priority. Jones and Titford consistently also failed to take Kaylea to scheduled appointments, and she has problems with her physical ability and also with her weight, so failing to take her to scheduled appointments is going to be problematic for her health. So for example, she gets discharged from physiotherapy in 2017, and she gets discharged from a dietetics service in 2018. So what we're seeing there is physiotherapy is essential for people who have low to no mobility. It can be incredibly painful when you're in a situation where your movement is limited. Also, her father worked really long hours, and that means that really the responsibility for Kaylea's care fell squarely on her mother. I think we can all empathise and sympathise with a parent who feels fully responsible for the care of a child with additional needs, but usually they do everything at a cost to their own. So they're exhausted, they might be frustrated, they might feel even abandoned by a partner, but all they do is work hard to protect a child that they love. And on top of this, his blatant disregard for responsibility, it then becomes evident that Lloyd Jones, her mother, she's either unable or unwilling to properly care for Kaylea. And I think I'm saying that in a really super light way, but it's hard to actually find the words to express what I'm going to talk about. And it's so diabolical and so disconcerting that an already, shall we say, neglected to a degree child is about to fall into an area of neglect that is so unusual in our society. Lloyd Jones actually worked as a carer in the community. She was actually out there taking care of other people's needs and then coming home and willfully abandoning her own child's. How blinkered to reality do you have to be able to go out on a daily level and actually provide care elsewhere and then come home and do none in your own home with your own child? Now, it's later established that in the 3 months leading up to the October in 2020, Titford and Lloyd Jones spent more than £1,000 on takeaways and fizzy drinks. That is a of a negative diet. You cannot get away with eating that type of food that regularly and not firstly put on weight, but secondly, impact on every single vital organ that you have, genuinely. Because of the processed level of the food and the high sugar, high fat content, it is terrible on a regular basis. Listen, we all like a takeaway. We all like a takeaway. I am somebody who will occasionally order a really great vegan pizza, and I enjoy it. It makes me feel a bit afterwards, but I enjoy it. I don't have all of it, just a few pieces, but everybody likes a takeaway on the whole. There were some of you out there going. Now, Kaylea, as we've talked about, she depended on her wheelchair for her independence. It was really important to her. She didn't let people push it. It's how she got around. But of course, if you've got a wheelchair and it's the size for you, and then your weight literally balloons, you're going to outgrow it. But her parents didn't bother to get her a new one. So she couldn't fit into this wheelchair anymore. She couldn't get around anywhere anymore, not even in her own home, because she's unable to use her legs. So as she couldn't move herself around the room, that further impacted on her weight gain. It also meant that Kaylea couldn't escape the squalor, and I mean squalor. Her bed is the place that she remains, and of course, what would you expect her parents to be doing on a regular basis? Well, you'd expect them to come in to make sure she could use the toilet, to make sure that she was clean, but no. She's left in her bed in her own waste. Her bed became her toilet. She was literally left surrounded by her own dried filth. Now, in addition to making absolutely no effort to tend to their daughter's hygiene, they're just leaving her to rot away, Lloyd Jones and Titford, they made no attempt whatsoever to look after her physical health either. So imagine the collision that we've just talked about of all these problems. And this child, she's just a child still, is having to deal with this minute by minute every single day. And there is no one coming to help. Kaylea's basically gone from this independent teenager to a prisoner in constant suffering and constant degradation. She was there for months in that state. Months. And the thing about Kaylea is that she knows something is really wrong. She can see what's happening to her. She's an intelligent young girl. So she ends up sending what I can only describe as absolutely heartbreaking texts to her mother. In one, she pleads with her to tend to her leaking leg. That's what she asks. She's asking her mother, please, come and help me. Lloyd Jones texts back, for f***'s sake. No compassion, no empathy, no consideration, no care, just for f***'s sake. What really breaks my heart is throughout researching this case, I kept thinking, did Kaylea speak to emergency service? Did Kaylea call an ambulance? Did Kaylea try and get help for herself? And she didn't. And that's because she trusted her primary caregivers. At the end of the day, she's just hoping. You can hear that in the fact that she's texting and getting these responses back, but she's doing nothing to protect herself. She's hoping that it will be okay, just like so many of us do in these situations. I'm sure we've all been there. So at this point, because the staff are great at the school, they're concerned. Where is she? They'd already known that there'd been certain problems. They know it's not an ideal living situation. So the staff start making welfare calls, and they're querying the non-attendance of Kaylea with her mother. And Lloyd Jones just gives loads of excuses, much like she no doubt did prior with the agencies that stopped essentially supporting the family because they just wouldn't engage. We get to the evening of the 9th of October 2020 and Kaylea was in such agony. She was screaming. In response to that child screaming, she's decaying in front of her own eyes. The cycle repeating again and again and again. And the response to her abandonment, neglect, and agony is to be told to shut up. She's completely bedbound. She hadn't used the toilet or showered since before lockdown. That's half a year earlier. She'd just been trapped, eating, sleeping, defecating in her own bed. Gets to the morning of the 10th of October 2020. It's just shortly after her 16th birthday. Lloyd Jones goes into Kaylea's bedroom and she finds her dead. She's still sitting up in her bed. It's Titford's mother who actually calls for the ambulance, and they tell the dispatcher that Kaylea's cold, that they weren't able to wake her. And the dispatcher tries to talk her father through CPR. At this moment in time, it's evident that he's very emotional, and he just replies that she's The dispatcher says to him, listen, get her on the floor. We need to try to help her. Because people can appear, their heart can have stopped beating, but if you do CPR, you get them on the floor, at times you can restart the heart and that can save their life. But he simply says, I can't. She's too big. The room was a complete scene of chaos. It was completely cluttered. Even a chip fryer was in there with drips of fat down the side, but these flies, etc. She was officially pronounced dead at 8:12 a.m. When they did the autopsy, because instantly they could see that something very wrong had occurred, they later established that by the time of her 16-year-old Kaylea weighed an unbelievable 22 stone, 13 pounds. It's 146 kilograms. So both Lloyd Jones and Titford, they get arrested and they get charged with gross negligence, manslaughter, and causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable child. We get to the 1st of March 2023. This is when we have sentencing. Judge Mr. Justice Griffiths sentenced 45-year-old Titford to 7 years, 6 months in prison. If he behaves himself, he could be out after 5 years. 5 years. It just seems so minimal. Now, 40-year-old Lloyd Jones, her mother, she claims that she'd basically fallen into a deep depression following COVID lockdown. Apparently she'd withdrawn from her everyday responsibilities, so at this point she couldn't care for her daughter. Because she had the early plea deal, she actually got a lesser sentence than her husband, which blows my mind. So the judge sentenced her to 6 years. She could be out just after 4 years. That to me is just so wrong. But like I said, what I want to leave before I end this video is the reminder of who Kaylea was. She was a really determined, resilient young person. She could have become an incredible human being, growing into adulthood, being a Paralympic, cheating at cards, maybe graduating to know how to cheat at poker and making millions. And Kaylea had a personality that was infectious. She had a compassion about her nature that people loved her for, and she genuinely deserved so much more. Be safe.